Hello there, I am here today to wrap up my July reading. I will say that I did do the reading rush this month and I have separately reviewed all of those books in a video which I will link down below. I'm not going to mention them here or go through them here because this video would get crazy long if I did that. So the books that I read towards the end of this month are in that video instead. This is more the first 2 weeks of the month, so let's get straight into it. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I've been quite distracted with my reading, as is always the case at the moment, but I've had some really good reading experiences this month actually. So the first book I started with was Elizabeth Gaskell's North and South. Now, I kind of just really felt like a cosy classic recently. It's been a long time since I read a classic, and I just had that summer feeling of a book that I just wanted to get lost in, that was kind of cutesy and nice. And actually I really had North and South wrong. Not in a bad way, but I kind of was expecting it to be a bit of a Jane Austen kind of romance, and will they or won't they, and love triangles and that kind of thing. And it was not that at all, which is good because I don't often get on with Jane Austen that kind of romance. But this is basically about, it's set in the Victorian times, and it is about a girl who, she's grown up in Hampshire, lived quite a sheltered life I suppose, and her father ends up moving her to the north of the country where obviously things are very different, priorities are very different. There's much more of a working culture, and there are much more, you know, there are strikes going on, and there are people who haven't got the privilege that she has perhaps grown up with. And at first she really doesn't want to go, she's not happy about it, she doesn't understand why she has to leave her friends and her home, but then as she moves up to the north and she begins to meet people who have had very different life experiences to her, and she begins to understand the plight of the working man, I suppose, and there is a love story in here, but it's very to the side. It's not a central theme at all. Predominantly it's just I suppose about the discrepancies between North and South, hence the title, and I really enjoyed it. I think it had a lot more depth to it than a lot of the novels that were being written by women around that time, which is difficult to say because obviously all novels by women at that time were groundbreaking. You know, I'm not discarding the other novels that were written because I understand how groundbreaking they were for women to be writing at the time, but this definitely has a lot of meat to it and a lot of political meat to it as well, which I think is even more groundbreaking. For a woman commenting on this kind of thing is huge for that time, and I really appreciated that in this book and really enjoyed this book because of that. The one negative thing I would say is that I was reading this, as I say, I kind of picked it up thinking it'd be a really fluffy, easy read, and it has got a lot more weight to it than that, so I don't know whether I read it at exactly the right time, and I would like to revisit it at some stage, but for now I thoroughly enjoyed it and was pleasantly surprised. Please do excuse this grubby copy. I have to say I've been looking for North and South for a very long time, and there don't seem to be any pretty covers of this book because I was kind of looking for an edition that I found visually appealing because I like my books to be visually appealing, and all of the copies I have found were frankly hideous, so I bought this really quite tatty copy cheap, and was hoping to find a nicer one at some stage in the future. I have to say though, I kind of like that it is so beaten up because it does look like a book that has been really loved, and I quite like that. Then I picked up The Dark Circle by Linda Grant. Now this was nominated for the Women's Prize in 2017. I since added it to my wish list and then took it off, but someone bought it for me as a gift. Now, I heard generally bad things about this book when it was nominated. I think most people kind of weren't that impressed, and it hasn't got the greatest ratings on Goodreads. However, I really thoroughly enjoyed this. So this is about the period just after the war when something of a tuberculosis epidemic in England, and people like George Orwell were caught up in it. You know, it was quite a serious condition. Obviously it was an illness that had been prevalent throughout history, but there became a real focus on it, I think, just after the war, and they were really pushing for a cure, and then this focuses on the part in history just before that cure was reached. Our two main characters, Lenny and Miriam, are brother and sister. And Lenny ends up contracting tuberculosis, which is picked up just on a routine NHS x-ray, which is another new thing that they're doing at the time. And he has given it to his sister Miriam, and they end up being sort of shipped off to this NHS sanatorium, effectively. And the cures there were really quite harsh. Like, Miriam gets put outside for the cold cure, where she's literally just left outside. She's not allowed to come in because the cold is meant to be good for her lungs, and basically the things that this sanatorium does make the situation worse all around, and they get worse there rather than better. And beside that, we're following the progression of the cure and whether these two are going to get it. The one negative I would say about this is that the end is very overwritten, and this is something that a lot of people mentioned in their reviews. I'd say that there's a lot at the end that doesn't need to be there. It goes on about 50 pages longer than necessary. That said, the writing in this is strong, and I really enjoyed the most of it. There is yeah, things didn't come together at the end at all. I'm not going to lie about that. However, that did not ruin this book. I still thoroughly enjoyed it. I would still definitely pick up another Linda Grant. So if you've heard kind of mixed things about this, I would recommend giving it a go. Then I read Giving Up the Ghost, a memoir by Hilary Mantel. Now, I have loved Hilary Mantel since Wolf Hall. However, she's not an author that I've got to very often. Last year I read Beyond Black by her, and I didn't actually enjoy it. However, she is an author who has just endless talent, and she is fantastic. And she's quite an inspirational person as well, because she's had a lot of chronic illness in her life, and obviously she's overcome that. And this is her memoir that I've had my eye on for a long time, and I actually started listening to this on Scribd, and then I stopped because I thought this is going to be a book that I want to own, and I don't want to ruin my chances of owning it by listening to the audiobook, and then there's no point in me buying it. So I stopped and I bought it, and I read it straight away, and I'm really glad that I did. I have to say, I wanted this, as a writer, I wanted this to be about her writing life, and it's not really. In fact, she very, very rarely touches on her writing life. She certainly doesn't talk about the actual process of writing or anything like that. If her books are mentioned, it's simply in relation to her life. This actually mainly focuses on her health and the impact that her health condition and her deterioration when she was in her 20s impacted who she is now, and it talks about the experiences that she had and the struggle that she had with reaching a diagnosis. And also, part of her diagnosis in the end is that she had to have her uterus removed, so she is unable to carry children, and she talks about that and how she feels about that, and how, you know, she had in her head this idea of her life, and now it's very different to what she thought it would be, and how she sort of had to rebuild herself after that. And I think that was really interesting, and I definitely think this would be a really good one for anyone with a chronic illness to read, because it really does end up being very inspiring. I'm glad I read it. As I say, I wanted it personally for me to be more about her writing process, which it's not. But, you know, we can hope that one day Hilary Mantel will bring out a book about her writing process. Who knows? And then I read Swimming Home by Deborah Levy. I have previously read some short fiction by Deborah Levy in a book called Early Levy, which looks at some of her early publications. I have also read the first in her sort of memoir collection. I don't know how many there's going to be in that. And this is the first sort of proper novel that I've read from her. So this was shortlisted for the Man Booker when it came out. And I have to say I really enjoyed this, and I knew I was going to enjoy Deborah Levy. Basically, this is about a group of people who are on holiday in France. They're kind of privileged, middle-class, middle-aged people, and they end up going back to their villa one day, and there is a naked woman called Kitty swimming in their swimming pool. And it looks at how she intertwines herself in their life. They end up inviting her to stay with them, and she kind of becomes this catalyst for the issues that they have under the surface with each other and themselves. And as you might be able to guess from that description, it's very like The Accidental by Ali Smith, and it has actually been published after The Accidental. Now, I would be lying if I said that that didn't tarnish my enjoyment of it. I think as a book, as a concept, as a written thing, this is probably stronger than The Accidental all round. I think Kitty is a much more rounded 3D character, whereas Amber in The Accidental is quite flat, and she is very much just a projection for the people around her. Kitty has her own personality, and she's very strong in this book. But I have to be honest that it was a bit on the nose for me in terms of similarity. I think I don't know whether Deborah Levy read The Accidental, but it very much seems like she read The Accidental and kind of was inspired by it, but I think there's a line between inspiration and just downright redoing the same thing, and I do think this kind of doesn't tread that line very well. I think it is a little too on the nose for me, but as I say, it's a shame because I think this book is generally done better, and I certainly think the characters are better in this book. The Accidental, it has issues in that some of the characters are quite flat, which is something that I think Ali Smith plays with on purpose, but in this I found that the characterisation was much stronger, but yeah, I just couldn't separate the two. But that said, I think I am definitely going to read more Deborah Levy, and I did enjoy it. Like, I can't deny that I enjoyed it, but yeah, it'll be yeah, I'm curious to know whether I would have enjoyed this or how I would have found this book if I hadn't read The Accidental. I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But anyway, I would recommend it, and I'm definitely going to be looking for more Deborah Levy in the future. So those are the books I read, I suppose, kind of in the first half of July, and if you want to know what I read in the second half, check out my Reading Rush wrap up down below. Please let me know if you've read any of these books and what you have been reading this month, and I will see you next time. Bye!